well. So, okay, Ryan.
That's it, Erica. We'll get into the first question that was submitted earlier this week. The question is, I'm a big fan of strategic planning, but have never led the charge as a strategy leader. I am new to our company, on the road too many times, and it has never stuck. Do you have any recommendations to pursue to make it work more successfully this time?
So I think that's a great question that gets asked. Whether people are new to strategic planning or have been doing it and have a pretty robust planning muscle, and it seems like the strategic planning process is one of those business processes that is by its nature problematic because it's not mandatory. So it would be great in organizations if we thought of strategic management, and I do mean that instead of strategic planning, but strategic management like the budgeting process, that it is something that we conduct with rigor, and that really comes from the top. So we're all well aware of the fact that if it's not supported and led and championed and committed to from top leadership, specifically the CEO or executive director, nobody else is really going to pay lip service to it, or people will pay lip service to it. Nobody else will really pay attention to it as well. So a couple key tips that I would recommend, and then I'll toss it over to Cammy, is I think one of the problems is engagement, staff engagement. So I would recommend, if we're trying to get it to stick, that you would engage the whole organization, and how you do that we can talk about if you would like. But one of the issues when things don't stay committed to is because people don't feel like their DNA is part of the plan and part of the priority set. So that would be my first tip, is full organizational engagement. The second tip I would recommend is when we're going through our planning processes, the tendency to not connect and be mindful of what was decided upon in an offsite will oftentimes undermine what the outcome of the plan is, and then the commitment to the actual, working against the goals and objectives. And what I mean by that is, and we just did this last week, you have 2 days of sessions, 2 days of offsites, maybe 3 days of offsites, however long it is. It's a lot of talking, it's a lot of ideas, and it's your responsibility as the strategy leader to be ultra diligent about capturing the decisions and actions and feeding those back out to the organization very rapidly after the fact, and capturing the goals and objectives as you heard them. Massaging the strategy and making sure it's strategic and it's got the right priorities and all that jazz, that's important as well, don't get me wrong. But I wanted to just say that what happens sometimes is what gets said, and then what gets produced is, if there's a disconnect there, people get a little they're not committed to the plan. So first thing first, employee engagement. Second thing is putting together a plan that was developed based on what came out of the offsite and not what you thought it should be. I think that's really important as well. And maybe the third thing too is, and you heard me mention this just a little bit, is thinking about the strategic planning process as a process, not an event. And that is something that is hard for organizations to commit to, and what that specifically looks like is to start with the end in mind and say, okay, let's assume we have a plan. I mean, it would be amazing if you started your offsite and you said, all right, you know what, let's assume it's going to be 3 days from now, it's going to be a month from now, we're going to have a perfect strategic plan. We know we are because we're good at doing that. Then what? What are we going to do with the thing? And so in a simplistic term is to actually commit to having monthly or quarterly strategy reviews, and I'll continue to hammer on that because organizations have such a hard time committing to it. So starting with the end in mind means committing to those monthly or quarterly strategy reviews in advance. So maybe we set those dates before we set our offsite dates even. We set the expectations about the fact we're checking in with our goals, objectives, and key performance indicators, and we commit to that now so that when we go into our offsite, we understand where all of this is leading to. So I would say those would be 3 big ways to make sure that we have a strategic management process that works for us. Employee engagement, developing a plan that was based on consensus, not what you thought. And the third thing is starting with the end in mind and scheduling your strategy reviews before you do anything in your offsite, so you set the new expectations on what you're going to do with your plan. Cammy, what are some thoughts that you might have related to answering this question?
Well, I think that, when you talk about being able to make sure that people see their DNA in what goes on is really important. And the way to do that in a way that it is almost an accountability exercise is to make sure that your strategic plan gets communicated throughout your organization in a way that can be understood by everyone in your organization. So that really sort of ups the game, because it's not just an executive discussion. It's not just a discussion in between the leaders of your departments. It's actually a promise that you're making to your entire organization to stay strategic and stay on path with that. Another thing especially for nonprofit organizations, for publicly traded companies, for municipalities, the importance of being transparent externally also keeps everyone on task. And what it really does, I know that's a little bit scary, because strategies, yes, they do change. And if they do change, that might warrant a conversation. But if done right, what your strategy will reveal to your internal and external stakeholders is a little bit about your vision, a little bit about your character, about your values, and those kind of things are important no matter what, no matter if you're selling services or products or what have you, because in this day and age, it's that kind of thing that makes the difference for organizations' long-term sustainability, is being able to have a character that people can understand and relate to, and part of that is communicating your strategy. So as much as you can, I know that there's sensitivities around that, but as much as you can, broad communication, I think, is one other key to that point that Erica kicked off there.
Awesome. So I just try to capture a couple of the ideas around there. One thing I just wanted to mention, then we'll take the next question, is employee engagement can occur. Oh, and there we go. We're both kind of into this whiteboard. As we mentioned, it might be a little bit messy. Sorry about that, everybody, but we'll make sure we get this all cleaned up. So one thing that we wanted to just mention on the employee engagement piece is we can get folks engaged via sessions in advance, via staff surveys, via we call it sometimes a war room, where people come and contribute in an organic way. I mean, there's all kinds of ways to get employees engaged. So just kind of, I'd mentioned I would come back to that, so I just wanted to point that out. Okay, Ryan, let's take our next question.